Hello, and welcome to Change Your Story, Change Your Life. I am Ada Pembroke. I am a storyteller and professional astrologer. 15 years ago, my life was very, very different. I was living in Silicon Valley. I was pretty miserable. I was married to a programmer who was married to Yahoo at a time when Yahoo was not a very happy place to be. Um, and I was a speculative fiction writer. And at that time in my life, I could not imagine a future that I wanted to live in, let alone write about, which as a spec fic writer, unless you actually like writing dystopias, which I don't, is a pretty miserable place to be. Fortunately, I happened to select an MFA program where Rachel Pollack was one of the professors. Some of you might know Rachel Pollack as a tarot luminary. And I knew her as my professor, and she taught us a lot about using tarot and storytelling together. And so, in an attempt to try to break the spell that I found myself in, I started doing a lot of work with tarot and storytelling together. Tarot led to astrology, led to my discovery of Stephen Forrest's work, Evolutionary Astrology. And I started to bring together the narrative work that I had been doing with Rachel with astrology. And the most extraordinary thing happened. I realized that my natal chart was the answer to my dilemma. In my natal chart was a story that was so wonderful, a story of my life, a story of my potential future, that I would do absolutely anything to get it. And it's a good thing that it gave me that feeling of determination because I was a long way from where I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be in a strip mall uh, tech industry paradise. I am supposed to be like a hobbit in the woods. I'm a fighting hobbit. I'm here to fight destructive narratives, but still, fundamentally, I'm a hobbit. I'm supposed to be, the person who lives down the street from the library and is friends with my librarian and likes trees and animals and good food. And that was not the place that I was in Silicon Valley. Um, and so I had a big adventure, a long journey to get to where I was supposed to be. And today my life is profoundly different. I have the little house down the street from the library. I'm friends with my local librarian. I live way out away from the city on the Oregon coast. I have a beautiful relationship, a daughter that all of the doctors said that I wasn't supposed to have, but my natal chart said would surprise me. And my work is helping people to find stories like that in their charts. So this webinar is not for me to tell you a story about tenacity and grit and pull yourself out by your bootstraps and your story is out there. You got to go fight for it. I'm just here to tell you about the power of stories. Neuroscience tells us that stories are the operating system of the human mind. Our minds are flooded with data all the time, way more than our brains could possibly process. And stories tell our brains what to prioritize. We see the world through the lens of our stories, literally. And the stories that we tell about what reality is create reality itself. So I believe that your natal chart has the story of your dream life, a story that is unique to you. It will be strange and countercultural and utterly unique. Um, and I believe that getting a handle on that story and understanding it and really falling in love with it has the power to change the world, or at least it has the power to change your life. The problem is that most people don't see this story because they think that every planet, sign, and house in their chart only means one thing. And a lot of the stories that we're told about the planets are pretty negative. People hear negative stories about being a Plutonian person, about having 12th house planets. And if you think that those are the only stories that exist, um, you're going to be really miserable, and it's going to shape your perspective in a way that is uncomfortable. The truth of the matter, though, is that every single thing in your chart could potentially mean hundreds or thousands of things. Let's talk about an example. Um, what is something that somebody has said in the chat that they've really been struggling with? Okay, so we're hearing a lot of people talking about Chiron in the chat. Um, Chiron is one of my absolute favorite symbols, and it's gonna be difficult for me to keep this short, but I'm gonna try my best to do it. Most people know Chiron as the wounded healer. Chiron is the story of the centaur who was rejected by mom at birth and killed by a trusted student, or wounded by a trusted student at the end of his life. And those facets of Chiron's story are true. It is true that Chiron's story began with rejection and ended with accidental rejection. Um, and a wound that could not heal, and he eventually got sent off into the sky to suffer forevermore. But in between the beginning and the ending is actually a beautiful collection of stories. There were so many of them when I went out to research Chiron. I actually discovered that Chiron was kind of like a Marvel character in the ancient Greek world. We have tons of stories about his adventures. And one of the stories that I really like to focus on uh, is the story of the beginning, after he was rejected by his mother. What happened? He was adopted by the gods, Apollo and Artemis. And so, one of the things that I look at when I look at Chiron in your chart is not just the wounding, not just the rejection. Who rejected you? Who made you feel bad? I think that your Chiron placement tells you about the gods who want to adopt you, the gods who want to be there in the moments when you feel most rejected. I have Chiron in Gemini, and Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini. And when I was a kid, I was an incredibly bookish kid because I lived in an athletic community and I couldn't run. So I spent a lot of time in the library. And when I look back at my childhood through the lens of that Chiron story, I can see how I felt like I wasn't alone when I was in the stacks. I really felt like I was adopted by the god of writing and storytelling and all of these things. And I believe that your Chiron has a story like that in it too. There is a there is a god or goddess who has adopted you in the times when you needed to be taken care of the most. So something that people tend to ask me when I start to talk this way is they're like, if your chart has a zillion stories in it, then what is fate? Do you just not believe in fate? I actually have an interesting approach to fate. I um I've done a bit of study of the ancient heathens, and they believed that fate wasn't real until it was spoken. Until fate was spoken, it lived out there in potential. And your story could go many possible different ways. It's almost as if, as long as you weren't looking at the story, it didn't really exist. Fate didn't really exist. It was a little bit like Schrodinger's cat, if you're familiar with that thought experiment. But when a prediction is made, a path is chosen. And they believed that this was such a powerful thing that if a seer made a prediction that they didn't like, that could be a death sentence for the seer. And that was because they believed that the seer was setting that fate in stone by speaking it. Not necessarily that the fate was going to become true, but from then on, you were on a path where you were either fighting that story or you were fighting for it. From then on, that prediction would define your life, just like Odin's life in the myths, where it was defined by the attempt to avoid Ragnarok. It became the center of everything, the quest that he went after. That's the experience that I had when I found that story that I fell in love with in my natal chart. It became everything to me. Everything was about going after that life. I needed it. For a while, life was was really difficult as I was chasing that dream, and I didn't know if I was going to get it. So when you interpret the meanings of the symbols in your chart, you are choosing what story you're going to follow. You are choosing what path you're going to follow. You're choosing whether that cat is going to live or die. You can choose a life that you don't want. You can choose a fate to fight against, or you can choose a fate to fight for. I actually think that it can be useful to have both of those kinds of stories. I've kind of built my astrology practice on fighting against the story that Chiron is a wound that will never, never heal. And I've gotten quite a lot of energy from it because I've got Mars and Chiron right together. So my battery is really connected to that story. Um, so again, this thing of choice. So some of you have been given stories that you don't want. Maybe you've read astrology books or gotten a reading and you just really didn't like what you heard and it's stuck with you. It's stuck in your head and you feel like you can't get rid of it. Um, you're like, maybe you're like, I don't want to fight that story anymore. Uh, so I've had a lot of those stories and I've done a lot of wrestling with it and I've put together this tool that I call the four questions. And I'm gonna introduce you to the four questions right now. A lot of people hear the title, the four questions, and they're like, "You mean the four questions of Carolyn Casey?" That's actually a different set of four questions, and I'm hoping at some point I'm going to come up with a fifth question so I can call it the five questions and stop confusing people. But for now, we've got four questions. Um, and in narrative astrology, we use the four questions whenever we find a story that really gets our attention. It either freaks us out or it lights us up. So, what are the four questions? One, how does this story make me feel? Two, what does this story say about me and the world that I live in? Three, how can I make the story better? And four, how can I make the good story true? So these questions sound ridiculously simple, unless you've studied literary criticism, in which case you could probably write a PhD on the second question. Um, but they're really powerful when you put them into practice. I believe that astrology is a practice. It's not theory. You're not really doing astrology if you're just sitting there with books. You've got to wrestle with it and apply it to your life and have practices that you bring into your life to work with astrology. So you're not really going to see the power of the four questions until you see them in practice. So I have asked Jay, who is my very first mentee, who has been working with me for years and years and years, and is an incredible astrologer, to come on the call with me and walk through the four questions so that you can see them in action with a story. So thank you for agreeing to do this with me, Jay. I know you're really busy and I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate that. I do too, really. So the story that we are going to be talking about, we actually have quite a while to talk about this if we want to, because I blew through the first part of this at a rate that I wasn't expecting. But so the story that we're going to be looking at is one that tends to get people really riled up. And the story is, quote, you knew exactly what you were doing being born in this place and in this moment. People tend to either love this story or hate it. Either way, I think it's a good story for seeing what the four questions can do. So, Jay, you got warning that this was the story that we were going to be working with today. So I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit. Question one, how does that story make you feel?
Like right off the bat, I hate that story. Like a very visceral, like, what do you mean? And like for me, that comes from like you enter in your life, right? You have all these struggles, you have all these like terrible things that happened. Like, for example, I've had a lot of tragedies happen for me in my life in the last couple of years. And if anybody, let alone a deity or the universe said itself, came down and told me, hey, you picked this for yourself at this time and place. So everything that's happened, you consented to. Crashing out is an understatement of what I would do. I would not take that well at all.
So this is definitely a story that you are fighting against, so to speak. Honestly, for me, it really depends on the day, whether I love the story or hate it. Like you, I've had a lot of things in my life that I feel as though I wouldn't choose. And I I kind of, imagine uh being in those in some kind of like between the worlds bardo place and choosing that this would happen. And I'm just like, did my past self hate me? Like what the hell? But then there are other days where I feel like I can see through the clouds to some kind of grand plan. And I'm like, the story is actually really beautiful. But I've noticed that there are patterns with this. When things are going well, I love the story. When things are not going well, I don't love the story at all. So um I have kind of started to use this story as like a weather vane for my mood. If I hate the story, then I am not particularly happy at this moment. But if I love it, I'm in a much more optimistic mindset. So that's question one. Question two, what does the story say about me and the world I live in? What do you think?
It feels like it contributes to this whole idea of like fate and destiny, and that there is a preordained path that you're going to be on, and you don't really have a say on it because it got decided long before you, like, you have no agency in it. And to me, that speaks, of course, admitting that this is coming from an American perspective as an American. Some of that I definitely can see Christianity components in that, cultural Christianity, because even when you're not a Christian, American culture has largely adopted it into what our culture is. It also feels like almost victim blamey, kind of like, oh, well, you decided to exist at this time of the universe, so like that's on you. You have no right to complain. You have no right to say anything. Just accept it and move on. There's like this bypassing almost of like the nuance and the complicated feelings around. Even if I did choose this, it still really sucks to go through, and I have a right to complain or feel a way about that. And I think our society and culture tend to downplay that and say, well, you made the choice, so you can't complain. And it's like, skip off. No, I can complain as much as I want, as long as I'm also making an effort to try to better myself where I can.
I really love how you are creating this balance between personal responsibility and also a recognition of like wider patterns and things that we're not really responsible for. Like, you didn't say this exactly, but what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that like, um, you can't choose your DNA. You can't choose the family that you were born into. You can't choose the culture that you were born into, but you do get to decide what you're going to do with that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a right to complain. You don't have a right to your feelings. You don't have a right to get angry about things. But when it comes down to it, and this is really reading between the lines, so feel free to correct me, but when it comes down to it, it's on you to fix it, even though you didn't create the situation. Not that we can't pull together as a society, not that we can't help each other, but the the responsibility comes in recognizing um, that there are ways in which you have agency now, even if you didn't necessarily have agency when the problem was created, to an extent.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel about it. And that's part of why I love astrology and why I love, the narrative lab specifically, because like this idea of having agency, even among all of the systemic issues and cultural issues and historical issues, all these issues that are so much bigger than us that we didn't create inherently, that were created and we were just born into, but we still have a responsibility while we're here to work on dismantling them, owning them, and trying to leave the world at least a little better than when we entered it. Which the frustration is real. Having to clean up problems that are not necessarily of your own doing is hard. But the other option is to basically just say, it's all out of my hands and I have no control, which is not very empowering at all and not very helpful. It's not a good mindset to go into the world with, because how are you going to change if you're not just, you've already accepted that your destiny, like you said, you're kind of speaking aloud that I can't change my destiny and that's what it is, instead of being like, wait a minute now, I got something I can work on, even if it's just myself.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. This stuff is so heavy. So the third question is, how can we make this story better? And this is the part where we start to exercise that agency. That's why I really like zeroed in on the agency and what you were saying, because this is the moment where we start to make choices. We don't want to jump ahead and the fourth question is where we really, really have agency because we start looking at what concretely we can actually do to make that story true. But we're starting to move in the direction of agency with this one. We're starting to say, okay, I don't like this story that I chose this in some mythical before time. What story do I actually want to be telling? Is this a story that I feel needs to be absolutely scrapped? Or are there pieces of something that I can take from this story that are useful in the moment that I'm in, that I can kind of like is this story like a car that needs to be scrapped, or is it a car that has, maybe a good carburetor in it and we could put that in some other car or something like that? What do you think?
I think with the story, the shift needs to really come from like this idea that you just have to accept your lot in life and not have any feelings or way around it. And what I mean by that, because I'm like, there's some stuff that's coming to mind that I've been reading recently about people who are doing this work, especially Black feminists who are doing this work in changing the narrative, especially since the world was very much not built for Black women and femmes and everyone to thrive. It wasn't built for us, but we still have to learn how to live in it. Somebody put it this interesting way where it's like that whole concept of you chose this life, so you just have to accept everything and bite your tongue or whatever. Someone reframed it. I think they were talking about like everything happens for a reason, which is a similar corollary. And they were like, instead of approaching it that way, they talked about, hey, you everything happens, but you get to decide what you take out of the thing. You get to take out if you learned a lesson. You get to take out that it's made you a better person. Or you don't have to. You can just accept, like, no, this sucks. And I'm not about to sit here and like rationalize it. It doesn't, like, it is what it is, or allow yourself the time to get to that point where you can look back and maybe find kind of the, like you were talking about Chiron, like when the wound is the medicine or the poison is the remedy, you get to look back and decide, okay, how am I going to take this thing that I've suffered with and turn it into something else for my own? Just like you're talking about whether you scrap the car completely or if you take that carburetor and put it somewhere else. So I guess I would reframe the story as things in life that you didn't ask for are going to happen to you. It doesn't necessarily mean it happened for a reason, but you can decide what it means to you and your story. You get to make that choice because you are the author of your life. Even with all the circumstances around you and all the things that are out of your control, how you look at it, how you approach it, and how you let that move you forward into the future is way more important than this concept that the universe or the gods or what have you decided your life for you and you have no agency in creating your own life.
Wow, that is really. really powerful. Um, I feel like you should have done a mic drop right there, Jay. Um, there we go. Yes. um, what you said about moving the agency from the past to the present, I think is so powerful. What you said about how, um, if you believe that this is fated, this is chosen, you chose this is your fault. It means that all of the choices that are relevant in the story already happened and you can't do anything about it. But and we, going back to the second question and what this means for us in the world we live in, you can see who benefits from that story. The people who are in a position of power, who are in a position of, um, I hate to use this word because it's gotten tainted, but privilege. They really benefit from the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid being compliant with the grand plan or whatever that they're trying to do. Um, Often the people who push that story really hard, if you look at their lives, they're not actually living that story. They choose to have, um, an incredible amount of agency, and it's other people who have to accept their fate, not them. Um, and so I love the fact that you are taking this idea of you chose this, and it's almost like you're turning it back into a question to ask in the present. Like, what am I choosing right now? It's like you're moving that center of power from this thing way back that you can't touch to right in this moment. And one of the reasons I love it is because, there are things in any given moment that we cannot choose. Um, I can't choose the fact right in this second that I didn't put socks on an hour ago and now my feet are cold. But I can choose whether I'm going to feel grumpy about it or whether I'm going to use it to make a lame joke in this webinar in this particular moment. I can choose how to respond to the decision that I made before. Um, and I can completely remove the question of whether or not, I made some decision in the past and just, or remove the question of what in the past I did to be responsible for it, because when we focus on that, we have the tendency to kind of fixate on that ruminating, and it's not really productive. But you can shift it, and be like, okay, what is actually happening now? What is the present that I'm in? What is the um the work that I can do to improve things for myself in this moment, in the future, for others? It feels like we go from being in this really cramped room with no doors and no options to suddenly having this opening.
Yeah. It's funny you said that last part. Well, there's a couple things I'll touch on real quick. I want to point out what Jen said in the chat. Um, she said, and hopefully that's the right pronouns. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It also pairs with some Christian doctrine that emphasizes the idea of suffering now so you can enjoy heaven later. And in some denominations, that the more you suffer now, the better your afterlife, the better you are as a person, no matter the lived experience of all of that. And basically saying, if you don't want to do that, you're a bad Christian and a bad person. Yeah, that whole idea makes me think of the whole idea of sin and that you're just born evil and like all you can do is repent for existing. And I'm like, what? Why do you think that sounds like an enjoyable concept whatsoever? Like, don't want to follow anything that's going to make me feel bad for existing when I didn't choose to exist. I didn't ask my parents. The spiritual concepts behind potentially that aside, I didn't choose my parents. I didn't choose all of that. I was just brought into the world and I just got to deal with it. And now it's like, well, you're an evil person and you have to repent. And I'm like, I literally got born 2 seconds ago. What do you mean? I've done zero things. So I think it's a very fair thing to say. As for that whole concept of like a cramped room, there's this book I've been reading by a Black feminist, Dr. Jen M. Jackson, and they wrote this book that talks about the different lessons they've learned from different Black feminists over the course of their life. And like the first chapter after the intro focuses, I'm feeling upset because I can't recall the name of this person and I don't have time to run upstairs and get my book. But there was this enslaved woman who she was being her master was coming after her sexually, assaulting her, trying to pressure her into being with him, you know, and it was causing a lot of problems. They were unwanted advances and so on and so forth. Eventually, it got to a point where she knew she had to escape, or he was going to get his hands on her. And so what she ended up doing is that she hid in this crawl space above the shack in her mother's shack, had her mother take care of her kids, and she hid there for 7 years, occasionally coming out to deal with things, get some fresh air and move around. But she was stuck in this like really cramped space that basically you could only lie in. That's how little it was. And she ended up disabled there. She got bit by rats. It was a whole thing. But in that moment, Dr. Jen's whole point in bringing this woman up is that they're talking about how freedom starts with the mind. It starts with that shift in perspective. It starts with that shift in narrative. And even if she wasn't physically free, this enslaved woman had an opportunity to dream that there was something better that she could get to. And so she spent those 7 years in this cramped, dark space. And eventually she was able to escape and get out and make a better life for herself and her kids. And that is what sticks out to me about that level of freedom and agency. Even when you are at the worst and you are in the worst possible situation, your mindset about it is still something you can control. The story you have is still something you control. And even when the odds seemed completely against you in every possible way, you can still take a chance to break things down and find your agency, find your voice, tell a better story, know that this life sucks. And I know there's something better out there for me if I can just take the steps that are available to me now so that I can make the steps, hopefully, to get there eventually. Like you were saying at the beginning with your chart and everything, creating the life you want to build. So, like, that's the importance of this story. And then the other part is that this is also about the psychological concept of the internal versus the external locus of control. Basically, the external locus of control is all the stuff that's happening that you can't handle. So, society, culture, the things that happen around you that are the result of your own actions. But the internal locus of control are the things you can change about yourself, your attitude, whatever. And that people operate much better when they're thinking from the internal locus of control than the external, because the external sends you into like just a defeatist mindset of like, I'm screwed, this is it, that's out, that's all. And then that internal locus is what we're talking about here of like shifting that perspective enough so you can start trying to build the life you need to live.
I need to let you have the last word on that one. Thank you for the TED Talk. And I'm not being facetious there, like seriously. Um, yeah, so that's the third question. And we're starting to see maybe, I think, how the third question and the fourth question tend to bleed into each other. As soon as you open that door to agency, as soon as you start rewriting the story, you immediately start to put yourself in the position of thinking about what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And that's how you know that you're on the right track with this. When you get to the fourth question and you're not like, okay, whatever. There's usually some form of excitement. There's some form of energy that's coming into this whole process. So, um, at the risk of asking you to repeat yourself a little bit, Jay, what do you think of the fourth question? How can we make the story true?
The new story that we're trying to change, the original story being that You chose this life before you were born, and therefore this is all your fault. We have shifted that into, all right, I was born into this life, whether by my choice or not, and things are going to happen that I hate and have no control over. But where can I find my agency to change and shift this story in my life for the better, despite everything that's happened? And for me, because this is a story I've wrestled with for a really, really long time, is like, how can you do that? And it starts with sitting down and being like, it does start with sit down, let's answer this question, let's figure it out. But to make this newer story true, it means that you have to start evaluating and looking at the stories. Pick the ones that you tend to ruminate about. So, like for me, let me say, I was talking to my sister last night about how I feel like with everything I'm dealing with, being disabled, dealing with grief, all of this stuff, that I don't have the capacity to do work and make money and do the things that make me happy because I'm just too messed up. The way I can reframe that is yes, I am suffering with all of these things that are not in my control. However, there are accommodations I can make to myself and a pace I can set for myself where I can do these things while being mindful of all of the other things that are kind of impacting my energy. I can write about what I want to talk about. I can post things I've written. I can come here and have this talk and call and use what it's happened to me as a lesson for other people or as something I can teach from. I can recognize that even with everything that happens, I can still do amazing work. I can still come here and say the things that I do when I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen with this info. I'm just learning it and it's going to go somewhere. And then I can come here and turn it into mic drop moments. So it's just like, that's nice. you know, Sitting with that, it's thinking about, all right, to go a little Virgo right now, where am I at right now? Where do I want to be? And what do I need to do in the in between to get me closer to that ideal sense of self? So it's taking what you want and then breaking it into really teeny tiny steps that you can start with today and just shift the needle bit by bit because over time, it's like, oh, it's just been doing a little work every day. But then, like 6 months from now, the needle's already halfway past to where it needed to be because it all added up over time. And if I keep that mindset in it, that perfection is the method, not the result. It's that I keep getting better and I will keep working at it and get better at it. I'm really good at astrology. I am not a perfect astrologer. I will spend the rest of my life perfecting my astrology. And that's a good thing. That is what allows me to kind of move towards, okay, yeah, I things have happened. That really sucks, but I still managed to live my life anyway.
That is, once again, really powerful. I love how you talked about the difference between where you are and where you want to be and breaking it down into concrete steps to get there because that is the essence of the fourth question for every single problem that you're facing. Like you start out with, this story that um I said at the beginning that we do the four questions with stories that make us excited. Um we do, but the vast majority of the time, I've got a Scorpio stellium. I'm working with stories that are pretty negative. So a lot of the time you're starting out with a story that is like, I don't like this. I don't want this to be true. And you're building a story that you want to be true. And then we live in the fourth question. We live in that place where, um, you know, if we really want something at every moment, we can be asking ourselves, what is something that I can do in this moment? One little thing that can, um, help me to get to where I want to go. Um, thank you, Jay. I knew I wasn't going to regret asking you to do this, even though we did absolutely no rehearsing in advance. We never do, but I am still amazed every single time we work through things like this, or you pick up the mic when we're in a class or whatever, and I'm I'm profoundly grateful for your wisdom and intelligence and the fact that you bring it to this group. So
Thank you. I mean, that's a lot of that has been your mentorship with narrative astrology and everything like that. That like walking me through and getting me to push past like some of the more like, yo, I'm taking this really specific interpretation of it. And it's like, how can we shift this a little bit? Like you're on the right track, but like let's shift it a bit. That's helped me a lot in that. So, that's one of the benefits of the lab. I've gone through many iterations of this space from 2018 to now. So it's been a long time, but like, yeah, getting to this space has definitely helped. I do want to address Jane and Pusley in the chat, or Jen, my bad. Jen said, what you're saying in Virgo voice reminds me of you always have what you need within arm's reach. A dream I had one time, but low key so real. You can only take the step in front of you. And Pusley added on with a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And like, yeah, it's a slow process, which is terrible for me because I am impatient and I don't want to wait. I don't have Taurus placements for a reason. That's why I have Ada. Ada's a Taurus person. I got lots of Taurus people to slow me down and be like, hey, hold up now. And I'm like, man, no, I hate this. But yeah, it's the little steps that build up over time that really do. And I will say that applies to astrology too, regardless of what level you guys are at. Over time, bit by bit. I didn't learn all of this overnight. I've been studying astrology since I was in the third grade. I just turned 29. So it's been a long time that I've been studying these things and learning them. And it was bit by bit by bit over time that allowed me to make that shift, which is why the lab is someplace you should join because we help you do that, which is how I'm going to reel the sales pitch back in, especially because we are at where we wanted to be with that. We're actually at 43 after. So now we're going to move on to testimonials.
so for those of you who are here for the first time, um, before we started recording and before we got everybody together, Jay and I were like, okay, we need to know when we need to stop this conversation and we need to be on time because she and I have the tendency when we sit down to work on these things to just kind of go, go, go. And it's become a joke in my classes that, when Jay and I start going, we're probably going to go over time. But we we don't know many of you, and we want to be polite, so we are making sure that this is an hour like we promised when you signed up.
Yeah, we don't want to
Okay.
scare people away before they join. Let them join, and then you'll be subject to my dissertations on everything.
Well, if you join, you know what you're getting into, and if you're like me, you'll be grateful. Um, so after we go through the four questions, I always feel really hopeful and energized at the end of the process. Like I feel ready to go out into the world and make that story true. Imagine doing that for your entire chart. That's what I did, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing in my course, Storytelling with Astrological Symbols. I've been a professional astrologer for 10 years, and I created Storytelling with Astrological Symbols because I kept on seeing the same thing over and over and over. People were walking around thinking that their charts were some kind of cosmic diagnosis instead of an invitation to their dream life. This course is a year-long journey where you can learn from any chart. You can look at your chart, your friend's charts, your client's charts, and you can start seeing those charts as complex stories instead of just a list of problems to fix. And this course isn't going to teach you keywords and cookbook meanings. Um, we will look at planets, signs, houses, and aspects from lots of different perspectives. We're going to study different schools of astrology. We're going to study how people work with astrology in different cultures. And most importantly, you're going to see the dance of the planets in your own life. You will have the opportunity to put together your own lexicon of symbol meanings. You'll get to decide what Saturn means for you in your own life. Some people take storytelling with astrological symbols once and they get exactly what they need. Others come back year after year because they want to go deeper with it in some way. I said earlier that this is a practice. I really believe that that's truly important. We don't learn astrology and then run off and live the rest of our lives. Astrology helps us to live our lives. So you can go as deep as you want with this course. You can play around with the material and grab what fascinates you, or you can do a deep study of your natal chart. It's entirely up to you. I give you lifetime access to the course materials. So it doesn't have to be a one and done thing. I want to help you build an astrology practice. I want to help give you the tools that you can use to work with charts for the rest of your life. Even if you have no intention of going pro, even if the only story that you care about is the story in your chart. What really makes this special, though, is that you don't have to do this work alone. That's why I asked Jay to do this with me. I wanted you to meet her, actually get to know her a little bit as a person, because community is a really important part of what I do. There's somebody else here from the lab who I've kind of roped into doing this with me. Pusley has been studying with me for 5 years, and she's gone through storytelling with astrological symbols several times. And she's offered to share her experience of the course and in the lab. So
I think more importantly, what I've really gained from taking these over and over again has been more so the experience. Now, it's, when you first learn writing and narratives, there's that idea of show versus tell. And I feel like a lot of the process is telling, but what you really get out of it is you eventually start showing, and you eventually start showing up in your own life as well as other lives. You start to end up getting like your supportive cast essentially through this experience of being in the lab. Like you get friends, you get just people that uh help you be accountable to yourself, and you get to be accountable to others. And it really just helps you improve your life as well as you get to help improve others. And that's really the special part of special opponent proponent is being able to improve in that way. And it's kind of gonna surprise you if you do keep showing up. And because one day you're gonna look back and you're gonna see how much further you have come and how much more you've improved your own story and have improved other stories by being a part of the lab and by participating in particular in this course.
thank you, Pusley. I really appreciate you coming on. And if it's not outing you, I know that it was a big deal for you to do that, to get on camera and talk like that. And so the fact that you are here and that you told your story is um, just a reflection of how much work you have put in to showing up for your story. And I think that that's really powerful. Um, and if you knew Puzzly's chart, you would know how powerful it is, because Puzzly has more things in Capricorn than I have ever seen in my entire life in her chart. So what is storytelling with astrological symbols? It's a 12-month course. You'll get a new module every month. I want to make sure that you have time for the material, or frankly, if life comes up, you're not sitting there scrambling to get through stuff and you're breezing through things you shouldn't be breezing through. I want to make sure you have time. I'm a Taurus. We go slow. Um, Each module includes lecture videos, essays, and some homework. And I'm putting that in air quotes because it's ungraded. It's between you and your chart whether you get it done, though I'm always available for help. But the homework is designed to help you apply the material from the module in a step-by-step way. So the module, the essays and the lectures give you the theory, and then the homework gives you the step-by-step. You're going to get access to all of the materials in the module for lifetime, at least as long as Google decides to keep Classroom running, and it's 10 years and running. So here's to hoping that we get another 20 out of this. Um, so there's no pressure to keep up. During our year together, you will also get access to monthly group calls where we practice together and I answer your questions. The calls are recorded, but I really encourage people to come to the calls because they aren't lectures, they're discussions. I asked Jay and Pusley to talk today because I wanted to show you what we tend to do in these calls, what they're like, what the spirit is like. Um, these are our community. So the course starts on October 20th. That's when our first live call is going to be. As soon as you sign up, you're going to get access to Module 1, and Module 2 will come out on October 21st. Don't worry, Module 1 is quite a bit shorter than Module 2, so you're not going to fall behind immediately out of the gate. So that's the course. We've been talking a lot about the Narrative Astrology Lab, and this is the part where I finally tell you what the Narrative Astrology Lab is. Um, the Narrative Astrology Lab is our astrology learning community. I would really love for you to think of it as your astrology practice home. And I'm being a bit of a sincere millennial in saying that, but it's really true. That's how I think of it. When you sign up for the lab, you get everything in the course, plus weekly workshops, guest teachers, a huge library of workshop recordings. We're up to 78, I think, at this point, and a Discord server that's there whenever you want to chat. But my favorite thing about the lab is the community. I know that everybody throws around community. I mean an actual community of people that you can get to know, not just a bunch of avatars on Zoom watching me talk at you. These conversations that we've been having, like that is the lab. We're real people building actual friendships. So, and your interest and your curiosity, it matters in the lab. Many of the workshops and courses that we have in the library have come from members' questions. If you want to go pro, you can kickstart your practice and start teaching in the lab with us, supported by people you know, people who actually care if you show up. It's not going to happen if you launch your practice on social media, let me tell you. So, storytelling with astrological symbols is $250, but you can join the lab for a year and get the course included for 300. So, if you decide to upgrade to the lab, it's only an extra $50. A lot of people tell me that my pricing is ridiculous. Everything is getting more expensive. You know this. I know this. My costs are going up too. Weekly calls for $25. It should be at least 75. But I believe that astrology education should be accessible. I would rather have 100 lab members paying $25 than 25 members paying $100 because the lab is out of reach for the other 75. When you join the lab, you aren't just joining a community that benefits you. Your membership allows me to keep the lab accessible for others too. The more people we have sign up for the lab, the easier it is for me to keep the lab at $25 a month. And the more newbie astrologers we can support, the more workshops we can host, the more of your questions we can answer. I really believe that you didn't show up to this webinar by accident. Whether or not you believe that that you chose it before you were born, I don't think it was an accident. You are ready to give up the horror stories that are haunting your chart, and you're ready to become the author of your own story. And our community is ready to help you. So enrollment for both the lab and the course is open now. The link to sign up is in the chat, and I will also email it to you. If you gave your consent for me to email you when you signed up for the webinar, there are a few of you here who didn't opt in to get emails from me when you signed up. We try our best to follow Euro style privacy laws here, which means that without your consent, privacy rules say that I cannot email you the recording or the sign up links for the course. So if you would like to hear from me after this, there's an opt in link in the chat. Click that and sign up to make sure that you're on the list. Again, we start on October 20th, and I would really love for you to join us. So we've got 5 minutes left. Time for some Q&A. Jessica, can you help me and pull any questions that we have into my DMs so they're highlighted? I've already got a few things here. Um, doo, doo, doo. So Kristen asked about having the sun in Virgo in the 12th house. If you have been around my work for a while, you may have heard me rant about suns in the 12th house. 12th house suns is one of my absolute favorite placements. And I'm not just doing that, saying this to make you feel better about yourself, Kristen. I really truly believe this. The reason why I love 12th house sun so much is because the 12th house is the place where everybody else can see something about you and it's completely invisible to you. The 12th house is basically the 12th, the house of unself-conscious cool. So when you have the sun in the 12th house, you don't know how much you shine. You don't know what you mean to your community. You don't know that whenever you walk into a room, it's like a lighthouse walking into the room. You are in shadows all the time because you can't see your own light. And when you have the sun in the 12th house in Virgo, you have the potential to really embody the best of Virgo for people. And Jay, I didn't say I was going to put you on the spot again, but are so eloquent when you talk about Virgo. Can you talk about like the best of Virgo, what that means? We talked about this on Monday in the lab, and Jay was just like absolutely fire on this.
Okay. No, I just said I have a Virgo stellium and I'm very strong about Virgo, as people in the lab know. The best of Virgo, it kind of goes back to what I said during the four questions of being able to see where you're at right now, where you want to be, and breaking and chunking out those steps. That's part of Virgo. Um, I'm sure y'all have heard plenty about type A Virgo, the spreadsheet Virgo, the Virgo is beige Virgo. I have a lot of problems with the stereotype of Virgo, even for the people who do fall into it, because it makes Virgo sound like an NPC and I will fight people. The magic of Virgo for me, Virgo is a mercurial sign. It's ruled by Mercury. You can be up in your head, but you have to remember, unlike Gemini, okay, a little, let me see. My bad. It just started storming here and my dogs are not happy. Um, hi.
We can't hear them, it's fine.
Oh, okay. Cool. Um, but with that Virgo energy and everything, Virgo is an embodied earth sign. Virgo works best when it has a tangible thing to work on. It works best when it's able to lean into lived experience and that kind of knowing rather than academic knowing, because the lived experience is so powerful and it shapes how you show up so much. And when you lean into that side of Virgo, when you lean into that healer side of Virgo, you really come out with the Virgo who sees perfection as this beautiful devotional practice where you get better and better over time with something that matters to you, and that you can then turn back around and be like, hey, people, I'm really good at this thing. I want to help you with it, like how we're doing with the lab, because that's their show of devotion and love and who they are by showing up in those ways. That is the side of the analyst Virgo and the perfectionistic Virgo that doesn't fall to the booby traps of like insecurity and doubt and self-loathing. It's I am where I am and that isn't where I want to be, but I still appreciate where I am in the process because that's part of the journey there.
Beautifully said. That is absolutely beautiful. I love how you made that connection between Virgo and devotion. Absolutely fabulous. Thanks again, Jay. So, unfortunately, we are out of time. Um, but if you have placements like this that you want to discuss with us, please join the lab, join the course. We will have Q&A time every single call for the course, and you can always drop questions in the Discord server. You can send them to me. Um, I I would really love the opportunity to sit down with each and every one of you and work through each of these things in your chart because this is really where my passion is. I love this work so much and I love the experience of working with somebody to turn a story that they hate into something that they love. So please give me the opportunity to work with you. I would really love that. Thank you so much for coming. It really means a lot to me that you were here, that you took this hour out of your day. Um, and I hope that I will see you soon, if not in the lab, on social media, in my inbox. I am a fairly accessible person. This is a secret. I'm telling you because you're here. Um, please don't hesitate to reach out.